Back with a long overdue solo episode, and it's a solo special, not one of my usual Q&As. It is the second in a series of me sharing the biggest lessons from my sales career and the, albeit really gratifying numbers that I managed to achieve last year. So in FY 23-24, achieved 1.1 million XVAT, and then went beyond that in 24-25 to do 1.7 million XVAT. And I'm going to be reflecting on the biggest lessons from that, what you can take, whether you're somebody that works in B2B, B2C, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee. I'm sure there's going to be plenty within this next episode for you. And lesson 1 is the only lesson I'm going to repeat from last year because it's that important. Number 1, customers don't care about what you sell or who you are. They care about its impact on them. This is the one lesson, as I said, I'm repeating from last year because so many businesses and so many salespeople get this wrong. I can package this in so many different ways, but I'm going to try and really drill into this one for you. You could call it the afters concept, which I first learned from a sales coach called Andy Bounds back in 2019, because people don't care about what you're selling. They care about what happens after you sell to them. What is the impact on them? You could call it a solution to a client's problem. It could be described as the bridge between a client's current position and their desired position and desired state. Ultimately, whatever way you frame it, you're shifting your language to help a client picture what it's like after they deal with you. I'll give some silly examples. People don't want the newspaper, they want the news. People don't want toothpaste, they want clean teeth. People don't want a lawyer, they want to stay out of jail or pay a reduced fine. In the same way, when I was operating my day job, I was very much focused on I'm somebody that generates revenue for the business, but through providing the opportunity that their furniture arrives on time, on budget, on spec when they decided to have it ordered. Not a case of we're a design-led furniture business with 2 warehouses, one in Manchester, one in London, with a range of designers that can support you with the design. You're not selling the thing that you do, you're selling the after impact on what you do off the back of that as well. It's really important. You will, of course, get into the minutiae and the details with the client thereafter, but you want to really give them a vivid image of what it's like to deal with you afterwards. One of my recent sales coaching clients, we were talking about his mindset coaching that he offers. So rather than being like, oh, I offer mindset coaching where you get a weekly call and support from me over WhatsApp as well, we were talking about you achieve greater clarity, greater focus, greater momentum in your life about the things that you care about. So whoever gets in touch with him can say straight away, oh, I achieve these things when I work with this guy. And that is something that you should be able to do immediately for the business, the product or service that you sell. And that would be an exercise that I would encourage all of you to do that. Lesson number 2, your day starts the night before. For me, that is typically me planning out who I'm going to call, when I'm going to call them, who I'm going to meet, when I'm meeting them. And it's worth recognizing that everyone listening to this is human, albeit who knows how far AI has gone when people get AIs listening to my episodes. But humans are typically poor at self-control, but great at organization. So you must create your prospecting schedule accordingly. I am somebody that understands that if something important comes up in my day job that feels urgent, I will shift from the thing that I've said I was going to do if I don't have really strict parameters. By that I mean, when I'm finishing on a Monday at 5 o'clock, I know at Tuesday between 10 and 11 that I'm doing an hour's worth of calling. I've got the 10 people that I'm going to call. I've got the numbers sat there. I've got the hooks and the things that I'm going to say to them on the phone. And I've got the dates that I'm going to offer them to meet out in front of me. Everything has been done the night before so that when Tuesday rolls around, even if there's urgent emails coming in, quotes requested, a delivery delayed, anything that could happen in my role that would maybe pull my focus away, I'm not distracted. I pick up the phone and in the words of Jordan Belford, I start dialing. That is so key. And it means that there's no opportunity for the important prospecting tasks that we know need to happen to fill up our funnel, to move things forward. There's no way that it doesn't let them happen. I actually did a LinkedIn post recently about 3 apps that support my outbound calling. And the first of those is the Google or Outlook calendar, whatever it is that you use, because time blocking isn't optional. It's actually essential. I schedule my outbound meetings and my outbound calls as if there's nothing else that can possibly happen. You cannot shift off the back of that. I batch my calls into a power hour. And when I'm talking to a prospect, I also refer to that calendar to offer a proposal or a meeting date for when I can meet with them, whether it's Zoom or whether it's in person. I actually first learned that from one of the really top operators that I met in sales called Alistair Brighton, who worked at Marsh when I was in insurance. And he said, when you're on the phone to a prospect, always refer to your diary because that's just another way to overcome an objection. And I've used it on every outbound call I've done since then for the last 6 years, where I get to the end of my pitch or short sentence that I've asked them. and then I'll offer them days or times when I can meet as well. And then if they object to that, I actually offer them another time and day. But we'll maybe get on to cold calling in another session. The second app I use is also recognizing that I'm a human being, and that app is Opus. This app blocks social media, emails, Teams, Slack, all of it. Why? Because, again, acknowledging my human fragility, even though I'm somebody I consider myself disciplined, our brain loves to escape discomfort and embrace distractions. And there's very few things more uncomfortable when it comes to sales than outbound calls where we have uncertainty about the outcome. If we know we're going to phone and get a meeting and get a proposal, then we'll pick up the phone and chase it down. But on the other side of that phone lies potential rejection, potential ghosting, potential pushback, potential objections we've never heard before. So at any opportunity, we will try and seek out something else. And when you're making these calls, it should feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's actually why it matters, because you can, by doing it, you stand out. And Opus helps me keep the main thing. So I'm in my power hour, I'm making my calls, my chimp brain is screaming at me to check LinkedIn or to check my emails, or actually maybe there's a Teams message from one of the project managers about an upcoming install. With Opus, I remove the option of distraction. You literally cannot click on the app, it won't open. So remove things, especially those that we know feel like productive distraction, like email or Teams. Remove those, get them off. The third app is one that I kept secret on my LinkedIn post, and I normally keep it for my coaching clients. But all I will tell you is, let's just say that it helps you to refine what you say and how you say it, and to review how well you did on your calls or how you could improve on your calls. Today's podcast is sponsored and supported by Hustle. Hustle is the way to get access to thousands of gyms, pools and saunas across the UK. I first used Hustle in 2014 after I graduated and started my first sales job, and I was traveling all around the country and I needed to still get my training to fit in. Simply put, I rely on Hustle to keep me fueled and able to get access to the important things to me to keep my work performance at its absolute best. Hustle is of course available on an individual basis like that, but importantly now, employers can now offer it as an employee benefit for their staff. Anyone that listens to a podcast like this one knows that it's so important to keep on top of your exercise, and any way that your employer can make that easier is going to be a huge benefit. If you're an HR professional or a small business leader, then you can visit Hustle in the show notes to get that in place for your staff today. Alternatively, if you're an employee and you want to recommend that your employer introduce it as a benefit, you can hit the link in the show notes too. Moving on from lesson 2 to lesson 3 is spray and pray, batch and blast is dead. In an age of AI where everyone is talking about, I can increase the volume of your outbound by 100%, 150%, 1,000%, I ask you that instead of sending the same message to everyone, think about, who am I sending this to? Why now? What outcome do I want to come from this email? And I recommend you go deep on your outbound rather than wide. One of the main things I did in 21 when I joined David Phillips was I targeted 10 to 15 ideal clients, and I worked extremely hard on prospecting them before I went wider to over 100 clients. And it meant you'll get a much firmer grasp on what actually resonates with those customers. You build adequate time to build a message that actually stands out to them, an approach that succeeds, an approach that you can refine and knock the little rough edges off, rather than going from 0 to 100 really, really quickly and not really knowing what might work. And I would even say, out of the small percentage of the kind of 10, 15 ideal clients that I went after back in 2021, you get to meet them, you get to really have a conversation with them, rather than if you're really scattergun and you're just hoping you book in a couple of meetings out of 100, you never really get there. So for me, don't spray and pray, don't batch and blast, don't go for volume the whole time. Bespoke and tailor your message, and it's a way that you will hit the mark far more doing that than you will with mass email. I use a framework for my emails called the 3 Whys. I use it for my sales career, I use it for approaching podcast guests, and I teach this to my sales coaching clients as well. And the first why is why you, and that means that it's entirely personalized to that person. When they open that email, of course it says their name, but the opening line could only possibly be for them or their company. And I'm telling you, that will massively increase the connection with the recipient immediately. And off the back of that, you then go into stuff about your business and when you want to meet them. If you do approach the things with this spray and pray, this huge outbound email mass, I think you're missing the wood for the trees. And with the rise of AI, and I use it across my business, I use it across the podcast, I use it across the things that I'm doing now to save me time and energy. You can stand out by being more personalized, because at this moment in time, who knows how it'll develop, AI doesn't have that capability in the same way. So you can stand out in an age where everyone's spamming ChatGPT emails or Grok emails or whoever they've used to write their emails. Of course, you can refine your emails with those, but really personalize for 10 to 15 of your ideal client. Spend time getting to know them, spend time getting to know what types of email hook get them interested, what books you a meeting, what gets you the opportunity to quote. That is what matters far more than just sheer mass and volume. You can absolutely see results from going with maximum volume, but I prefer to start narrow and then work my way out over time. The fourth one is more around emotions, and I've written down never too high, never too low. Emotional control was something we've spoken about in the podcast a lot. I think one of the recent episodes that will come out will have been with Chris Burns, and when he's come on one of the roundtables with David Hatt before, we've spoken about the importance of controlling your emotions in the face of external stimulus or even internal self-talk that may not help you. And I will tell you, in sales, those that crack under pressure lose long term. Being in emotional control means that you feel the chaos and the pressure, the uncertainty, but you don't let it dictate your moves. Your internal state and your external output remain the same regardless of circumstances. I actually recorded a podcast last summer, probably an hour and a half after I got pretty bad news in my day job where I'd lost out on a single deal that was worth 980k ex-VAT. But when I got on the recording for the podcast, you would never have known, if you go and listen in the archive, and I said, right, pick 5 episodes that you think I maybe sound a little bit down in, you would never guess. I just moved on. I stayed calm. All my next conversations that I had in work, in my family life, in my social life, on the podcast, they were all exactly the same. Even if I'd won it, I would have been the exact same. Well, that's not quite true. I would be a bit more elevated. But never get too low from the challenges that come your way. Because even as a percentage, and I think this was one of the lessons I shared on the episode 257 when I did the lessons the last time on sales, you must remain as much as possible in control, and the rejection element is going to come hard and fast. One of the first guests that really spoke about rejection from a sales perspective was Spencer Lodge, who is an incredibly successful guy out in Dubai. And Spencer was speaking about his first door-to-door sales job, and his task for the first week was to get 100 no's a day. He wasn't tasked or targeted on getting any yeses. And over time, they started to get a few yeses just by sheer nature of the volume. And again, volume is not always the answer, but it can help from that perspective by sheer numbers. But even when Spencer became a master of his craft and he was great at door-to-door sales and then everything he's gone on to do now, as a percentage of 100 outreaches, he still gets more no's than yeses. And that's the exact same for me. That's the exact same for anyone listening to this. If you're getting more yeses than no's out of your outreach, you're not doing enough outreach, or you're not stretching your potential client base far enough. In the same story around losing that 890k deal, that was really sore, but I had to move on quickly. I couldn't let it impact me. Just 1 week later, it would have been August 24, I closed the deal for 520k with them paying a 250 grand ex-VAT deposit up front, which was a huge deal in its own right. And I was clearly pleased. I was energized by that. And when I was dealing with that client, I made sure I didn't have any of the residual hurt or emotion from losing the big deal just the week before. I acknowledged that I had in my head that if I'd lost those 2 deals week to week, that would have been a really challenging period for me in terms of the numbers that I would have achieved in that financial year. But I made sure that I was never too high, I was never too low. I still brought positive intent and energy to the conversation for the 520 deal. I was assured, and I made it the natural choice that they were going to go ahead with us. One of the things I joke about, I spoke at this as well in January for Stephen Clark's mentorship group to his property clients. And I spoke about avoiding the dreaded commission breath. Everyone will have felt that. If you've been in a sales interaction with, like, a car salesman is one of the common examples, they feel desperate and needy for the win. So even when I knew that me closing 520 grand was going to mean a lot for me fiscally in my pay pack at the end of that month, I didn't want the client to feel that it meant a lot for me. I had to remain really quite stoic and make them feel that this was perfectly normal for them to go ahead. As it stands, that's still the biggest single deal that I've done in terms of one transaction. But as going through that process, I just remained completely calm as if it was totally normal. Yeah, all you have to do is you make the transfer of 250k to this account, send me the remittance advice, and we'll get your delivery date booked in. That would be the exact same way that if I said, yeah, all you need to do is make a deposit of $2,500 and we'll get your delivery date booked in. I stayed calm and I was able to deliver even when I was perhaps emotionally thinking in the back of my head, if I lose this deal 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to be hurting. The only other caveat I'll give, and that's why some of these phrases aren't the most marketable, because there's caveats and nuance to these things, and that's the nature of a long-form conversation. After a win like that, the 520k, use the momentum and the elation that you feel to move on to the next prospect and to push on. Don't become satisfied and satiated by the win. Move on to the next thing, bring the energy and the hype from it, but don't go over the top, don't be too high, don't be too intense, but make sure you ride the wave. And I would say some of my best prospecting calls to like really, really cold potential clients have come off the back of a big win when I've been like, oh, I can take on the world, I've just won that deal. Rather than being like, yes, brilliant, let me go and get a cigar and celebrate. That definitely did happen that evening, but I still made some calls as soon as that deal came through. Number 5 is going to be really helpful for a lot of you, particularly if you're a business owner or you're somebody that's time poor, which I think all of us are in 2025. And that is disqualify early, whether that's on a financial affordability grounds, whether that's on genuine need grounds, whether that's a desire to take action, or any other grounds that come up. You must eliminate prospects who are not suitable for your product or your service. If you speak to them for longer than is necessary, that's just busy work that's filling up your diary that's not going to yield results. It may feel good to inflate your pipeline or send lots of quotes out, but these will never ever convert if we don't address the potential big barriers as early as feasibly possible. Give yourself a chance to filter people out of your process who are, for lack of a more friendly phrase, tire kickers or time wasters. I've got a range of different questions that I use to disqualify people who won't buy or who are less likely to buy. And I use it almost like, again, wanky sales term, like a temperature check or a suitability check. And one of my sales coaching clients is an ex-pro rugby player who has a really big Instagram audience, and he now offers mindset coaching. He gets loads of inquiry over DM as soon as he posts like a call to action post on his grid or on his story. He gets so much inquiry, but a lot of them are young guys who are unlikely to be able to afford the packages and the type of services he offers, but they're just excited about the opportunity to work with somebody that used to play rugby for their country. So we actually built out a question set, and I'll share it with you just now, that he was able to ask over DM before booking in a discovery call and wasting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however many of those he was booking in. So some of his questions were, what challenges are you facing that made you consider investing in one-to-one coaching? So again, investing is the key term there. Before we jump on a call to explore more, have you set aside a budget for professional performance and mindset coaching? Then we have some ones that are like really helpful for framing. So he would say something like friendly, like, it's really great to see a young guy taking action or improvement. Have you invested in coaching before, or do you plan to do so now? Again, one that's a sort of gives it one hand, takes with the other. Many of my clients are more advanced in their career, and a lot of what they do comes down to their financial situation. The minimum investment to work together is, and then you insert the amount that is the minimum amount to work with you, and then you can say, is that in scope for you right now? So before you've even gotten a Zoom call, I know you don't want to necessarily give away your price, but if somebody is clearly unlikely to be financially suitable, it is worth testing the water like that. Again, to go a little bit further, before we jump on a call, my coaching is a notable financial investment, and I want to make sure that you're someone who's actually in a position to invest in something like this. And then you can soften the blow and say something like, well, you may not be ready to work with me one-to-one right now. I'll continue to share free content in here, as well as some of the templates that I've got available. In fact, here's a free, and then you attach like a PDF. He was attaching one on goal setting, for example, and then he had one on journaling. That means that you don't waste your time with people who are never going to buy from you. Think about that within your industry, within the services that you sell. If there are people that are just never going to be right, test them early and disqualify. The other disqualification piece that I always do is around decision-making power, but that's maybe a time for another day. Number 6, use pattern interrupts. Clients these days are pretty savvy, and customers are used to particular patterns or routines or stages that most salespeople go through. They look out for patterns in speech or in process, and they assess quickly whether it's a good pattern for them or a bad pattern for them. And there's so many ways to put in a pattern interrupt. Sometimes it can be from just standing out in terms of the quality of your delivery, the quality of your email, But more often than not, it's actually the things that you say or the things that you write that will break the pattern and be different from the average person in your industry. An example I'll give will be from outbound calling. And if you resort to the likes of, "Hi, it's Colin Campbell. I want to speak to you about X. Can we have a meeting?" you will get the results that standard approach reflects. So some of the popular ones that are got quite famous in terms of outbound calling were made famous by a guy called Benjamin Dennehy, who I've had on the show, the UK's most hated sales trainer. And he opens with the likes of, "If I told you this was a cold call, would you hang up now?" Or he'll do something like, "Hi," whatever their name is, "this is a cold call. Do you want to give me 30 seconds to explain why I'm in touch, or hang up now?" Now that is a good pattern interrupt because most people are trying to hide the fact that it's a cold call until, of course, it gets brutally exposed. I'm more nuanced than that. I'm going to give you 4 just now that I actually shared on LinkedIn recently. The first one, I'll say something like, "Out of curiosity, how are you currently approaching?" And then you insert a common problem within their industry. So for my sector for a long time, it would be, "Out of curiosity, how are you currently approaching ordering your furniture for this summer turnaround between your tenants leaving and the students coming back in September?" Second one can be, "You're probably going to tell me you've got no issue at all with," and then insert a common problem for your customer base. "Is that the case for," and insert the company name. So if I was to bring that to life, it could be something like, "You're probably going to tell me you have no issue with the supply chain getting furniture from the Far East. Is that the case for University of Leeds?" Third one, "Many companies I speak to are focused on challenge that they typically get in their area. Others are more concerned about," and then you put in a second challenge, and then you give them an option choice, which is, which one is more relevant to you at the moment? So if I was prospecting for my sales coaching business, I might say, "Many companies I speak to are focused on getting new leads. Others are more concerned about converting the leads they have. Which one is more relevant to you at the moment?" And then I've given them a choice to tell me what they care about and what they're focused on. The last one I'll give you just now is, "Would it be fair to assume you've already looked at ways to solve and insert their problem?" Quite often, if you're speaking to somebody really senior, they will be well aware of problems within their process that they want to work on, or something that they've had a challenge with in the past, because people would say that shit rolls downhill, but in a business and an organization, shit goes up the way to the CEO or the exec or people that own the business to deal with. So when you ask them, "Would it be fair to assume you've already looked at ways to solve," and then you talk about a problem that you know that they have, they will probably tell you ways they've looked at it before. If they've solved it, it'll be a very quick conversation. You'll get popped off the phone. If they've not and it remains a pain point, then you know there's a chance for you to say, "I'd love to tell you more about how we can solve that problem for you. In fact, I've solved it for a very similar business," and then you insert a case study and then you offer them a date to meet. If you have pattern interrupts in your conversations, in your emails, in your presentations, and you stand out from the crowd, you will get extraordinary results. Almost nobody I've worked with has done £1.7 million in revenue. So I had to do something different to do that. So I had pattern interrupts. I had different ways that I did my proposals. I had different ways that I communicate with clients. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. So for me, using pattern interrupts, trying to stand out, trying to be a little bit different has been so valuable. And I would strongly recommend you do the same. I think one of the lessons that I had to finish the show last year was disregard norms, stand out. I really encourage you to do that. One of the first times I did that was I was sending videos during the pandemic when we were all locked down on LinkedIn to CEOs, finance directors, and managing directors. And so many of them were so receptive to that because no other insurance broker was doing that. So in the same way, use a pattern interrupt, try and stand out. If it's becoming really common now for people to send long, at-length voice notes on LinkedIn, don't go and do that, but do something different to break the pattern, break what somebody's expecting, because customers are savvy now. They've been around the block, they've been prospected lots and lots, especially if it's a desirable client, you need to stand out. Number 7, and this is me maybe plugging my own resources here, but turn dead time into upskilling. Whether you're commuting, doing chores, walking, training, whatever it is that you're up to, I use all of these times to consume something that will help me when it comes to my brain, my body, my business. That's exactly the mission of Cambro. Now, there's times where the information I'm consuming is not necessarily about sales. It might be about communication. It might be about content around business and mindset. It might be around how I improve my sleep quality or my hydration. All the things that I've got on are priming me to be sharp, articulate, someone who my clients and prospects like dealing with. Of course, there's a double-edged sword where it's also supporting me with my ability to podcast well and to get guests in that regard and to come on the show and be easy to listen to and hopefully enjoyable to listen to. But removing the idea of dead time where there's just nothing happening and you're maybe using that time unproductively. And I would use this phrase I said to a gentleman called Ross Hartness, who I think many of you will enjoyed that episode a couple of years ago now. Not all screen time is created equal. So if you remove TikTok scrolling, don't listen to shit like the radio, and really be intentional with the time that you've got whether you listen to podcasts or audiobooks or reading stuff on LinkedIn or Substack, replace that quote unquote dead time. Put something in your ears, put something in your eyes that's going to help you move forward. And those small swaps will add up over time. I'm actually recording in London today, and the event I was at this morning was with 3-time guest on the show, Andrew Craig, who I promise we'll get him on for a 4th time in 2025. And he was talking about, I think he's listened to something like 500 or 600 of Tim Ferriss's episodes on his podcast. And he credits that with a lot of his own self-development, because he says, I just use the waking hours that I've got to constantly try and level up and consume good quality content. And I'm not saying you need to listen to 600 podcasts, but if we can swap out some of that quote unquote dead time for upskilling, you'll find that when it comes to the work that you're doing, you'll turn up and you'll be more prepared. There'll be some sort of idea that's sunk in, even if you don't have a really formal, strong process for implementing ideas that you've got. You will give yourself the chance to be like, oh, I was listening to a podcast this morning and now my prospect has just said this back to me and now I've got a good way to reply to it. That's going to be really, really refreshing. And these things, they almost happen by surprise sometimes. When I was first getting into sales, 2016 was when I first did like new business to like B2B. I couldn't really find any sales podcasts in the UK. So I was listening to a guy called Donald Glover in the US. I can't remember for the life of me what his like kind of stage name was, the sales mechanic or something like that, but it was quite funny. And I would go on my walk before walking back to my family house to make my cold calls. And I was still back in that time really nervous about cold calling. But having heard somebody talk about cold calling and dealing with rejection and winning big deals, I went back like primed and ready and excited. And I'm really glad now we've got much more relatable UK content. And I hope that I'm relatable for anyone listening to this when it comes to selling in the UK, because some of the Americanisms are a bit cheesy and a bit hard to relate to. But by consuming that content, I massively fast-tracked my ability to be more confident in my sales, more resilient, more inspired, which does count for something as well. So I would encourage you strongly, replace any dead time that you've got, particularly if you feel that you may be consuming things or listening to things or watching things that isn't really making you feel like you're getting better. Swap that out, put in something that's going to serve you and support you. And I promise you're going to become more fluent in your ideas. You're going to become more well-versed in topics. You're going to have more advice that you can rely on in action. Choose wisely, maximize the time you've got. Number 8, action is the antidote to anxiety. If you're concerned about your pipeline size, if you're worried about missing target, if you're unsure about the profitability of the business, if you're worried about whether a deal's on the right track, or you're ruminating if a prospect or client's maybe getting quotes from another supplier or they're going to go with another supplier, that is natural to have a level of anxiety about that. You actually should have a level of anxiety to that because it shows that you care. And by having the anxiety there, it should trigger action off the back of it. Anxiety is the stimulus, action is the response. When you have something you care about, you will want to do something about it to improve your circumstances. So for me in sales, when I have a feeling of anxiety or worry, I identify what the next obvious or immediately available step is to me to move it closer to where I want it to be. For example, it could be that the next step is sending a follow-up email. It could be that I send them a testimonial. It could be that I ask a client that I know knows them to refer me or send a recommendation. It could be that I'm worried about new lead generation for this month, so I email all my existing happy clients to say, we're looking to expand our service and our offering. Do you know anyone that would be a good fit? It could be showing up and posting on LinkedIn. It could be going on a a company that you're prospecting on LinkedIn and trying to find the right job titles and connecting with those people. So for me, a lot of the time back in the day, I would go on LinkedIn for half an hour on a Friday. I would go on all the big student PBSA developers and I would add the estates managers, the operations managers, and the heads of residence, because those typically were the job titles of people that would order furniture. So that was an action to my anxiety that my pipeline and my client base wasn't big enough. Because when I joined 2021, I had no clients. None. Not a single one. A couple of years later, did 1.1 million. Year after that, 1.7 million from fucking nothing. So when I was anxious about coming into a business with a big reputation as somebody that won new business, I had to act in alignment with that and deal with that little nagging thing in the back of my head to go and get it, to go and do something about it. Whether that was making a difficult phone call, whether I was asking a direct question. Quite recently, I had a client that we quoted for, and he normally pays within about an hour and a half, 2 hours of me sending that through. He hadn't paid for like 3 days. So I just phoned him and I said, "Oh, Paul, you're not going ahead with our offer. There's been a delay on you paying you normally straight on it." He said, actually, we're under a bit of pressure from a budget perspective this year. I've actually got another quote and they're cheaper than you. That nagging in the back of my head that this guy hasn't behaved the way he normally has was a warning sign for me to take action. So I phoned him. He told me that valuable information. I repriced and then re-underlined the value of what I was doing. He did get a discount, of course he did, but I also re-underlined that we've delivered on time and on budget for you for the last 3 years. None of the products have come out faulty or with a different warranty. Do you really want to risk that? I appreciate you've got a cheaper price. I'll get close to that, but I won't quite match it. Is that enough for you to work with me? He said yes. So when you get that nagging in the back of your head about where your sales are at, where a client's at, where a prospect's at, take some sort of positive action to move you forward. Remember, the only way to get ahead is to get started. So for me, I couldn't just sit in that feeling of not knowing why you hadn't ordered. I had to go and find out. And I'm really glad that I did, because it meant I still secured the deal. Number 9, margins and profit trump revenue and vanity metrics. 1.7 million is a figure that I'm really pleased and proud of, but the real value to that and the real metric that matters is the margin, and that is the profit margin. Sales without profit is simply a hamster wheel. I could have done £2 million revenue or £2.5 million revenue if I'd sold other deals that were purely just for flattering my ego, but I wouldn't have got good commission on them. I wouldn't have been able to keep driving the business forward. I've learned over time, and this is a maturity thing, to really get in the numbers on deals, understand the products that are going into them, whether sourcing anything niche or bespoke is actually worth it for that particular client. Really refining and working with the clients that actually drive profitability, not just top line growth. And I think it definitely comes with maturity. It comes with a title of sales director, where you have to be part of the business and you have to be somebody that's a lot more focused. But if you purely focus on revenue and driving money coming in, if you aren't paying things off at the back end, it's going to be really, really painful. Some of the big deals that I did last year were as low as kind of, 31 to 35%. But the smoothing effect of the other deals that I did across the 1.7 million meant that the margin overall was 48%. So that's 810k profit. Pretty good. When you consider that my revenue last year was 1.1 million, which I was really pleased with too. And that was at like 49% margin. The margin of 48% is important to get because it actually pays for things like staff's wages, it pays for my commission, it pays for the offices and the premises that we have. So always remember that you can do a deal that seems really exciting, but there must be enough meat on the bones for everyone to get paid and benefit off the back of it as well. I've spoken about it on this podcast already. The deal that was worth 980k, we went in at about 28% margin. It's the lowest margin I've ever quoted for. And I was actually a little bit worried if we won it, because while there's still a lot of money to be made from that, like 30% of that is still a significant chunk, like 300 odd grand. But if you set your stall out like that and you do that regularly, you quite quickly see pressures and cost pressures come in other areas of the business. And that's something that in the division that I've run for the last 4 years at my business, that's never been allowed. One funny thing I was talking about with my friend the other day is how profitable some businesses are versus others. People talk about education. So for example, I look at the P&L of my sales coaching business and it's extremely profitable because it's really my time and my expertise, a little bit of money on my StreamYard and my Zoom and my Calendly subscriptions, some time and money spent on creating quality slides and presentations that I run through my clients and some of the templates that I share with them. But it's highly, highly profitable because there's not big overheads. But there's going to be people listening to this that work in businesses that are really cash intensive to actually fulfill an order. And furniture was that for in some ways, where you've got a big warehouse, you've got stock coming from the Far East, you've got guys going and delivering it, you've got people in other teams like product and stock and customer service that are paid a salary based off the revenue the salespeople bring in as well. So rather than me kind of being, oh, I wish I could have got to 2 million, I could have got to 2 million, but only if I was happy with the margin on it, because you can't incentivize yourself for the wrong things. That is a really, really dangerous and slippery slope to go down. So I would encourage you to consider what's the margin like in your sector. Some deals is the juice worth the squeeze? If you get pushed right to the bone to just about make money on the deal, and then something goes wrong with a product or a supplier or some sort of niggle along the way, that's really, really going to hurt you in the end, because you'd never want to do a deal that you lose money on, and you want to be doing deals that make you a significant amount of money. One of the first things that shocked me about some of the big businesses that I was prospecting from an insurance perspective in 2019 in Scotland, kind of businesses with like 10 million plus turnover, was we would look at their accounts to help me bespoke my 3 Ys message. So the YU at the start would be about their accounts, their growth, or their challenges they'd seen. And some of these big like construction businesses, waste management businesses were making almost no profit, but their turnover was absolutely huge. So I quite quickly realized there's some sectors where revenue really is quite a vanity metric. Like, oh, we've got a £50 million construction business that builds houses. And then you look to their EBITDA and it was like 600K. And you're like, that's not going to last long if you keep going that direction. So on a micro level, wherever you are at, make sure the deals that you're operating and you're working on are profitable and they aren't just vanity metrics.
If you're new to the podcast, make sure you've hit the subscribe or the follow button on whatever platform you're listening on so I can keep getting fantastic guests just like this one.
Number 10, urgency matters. It will set you apart. That means fast replies. And in an age where we are all perpetually on our phones, I've definitely had podcasts where I've encouraged you to take breaks from your screens. We've had TJ Power on the show who's talked about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and how much of an impact our modern life can have on that. But when you're in business mode, you should be quick to reply to stuff. You should be quick to provide solutions. You should be quick to make changes. Even on like a really silly level. One morning, woke up in March in Dubai, was meant to be interviewing Callum White, who many of you will have enjoyed that episode with. He texted me to be like, have ended up with a big situation in work this morning. Can we push from 10 a.m. to another time later in the afternoon if the studio's free? If not, I can do later on this week. I phoned the studio, got another time, went straight back to him. We made it happen. His fast communication and ability to give other options about how we could move the situation forward is a way that he stands out. Same for so many people I like dealing with. Urgency is a really valuable trait in people because it allows you to get things done that shouldn't take very long at all. I think I've said already in this episode, it was with Andrew Craig this morning. He says, if you want something done quickly, give it to a busy person. And I really agree with that. Some of the people that I've worked with over the years or had dealings with over the years that are slow and bumbling are some of the least busy people that I deal with. And one of the red flags that I've had with a couple of coaching clients that I brought on was they were really slow on replies to get like our weekly call organised or to send me back the homework that I'd set for them off the back of our workshops together. And they're the people that get lesser results than the people that move quickly. Now, that's not to say to do a slapdash, half-arsed job to get it out the door and fast, but I will quite often be an advocate of holding replies. So, for example, if a client is expecting a quote from me for their furniture for this summer on a Friday afternoon, but I'm struggling to get a price for the desk chair come Friday at 1 o'clock, I'll email them and say, hi, Sarah, appreciate I was due to get you everything across before 5 o'clock today. It's actually looking like it's going to be Monday now. I'm just working on getting you a better price on the desk chair than I'm getting back from the supplier just now. Please leave with me. I hope this delay isn't too much of a problem for you. So there's two things to that. We don't allow her to go away and end up in this empty gap where she can think and catastrophize about why she's not had the quote back from me, if indeed she does, because again, some people are so busy it doesn't matter. And I also reassure her that I'm trying to do a really good job for her. The reason it's delayed and the reason it's late is because I'm trying to get a better price for you on this particular item. I'm being like a customer advocate for you off the back of this as well. And that's something that really stands the test of time. If you can reassure a client that you're in their corner, that you're working hard for them, you don't leave them in this kind of netherland of like middle ground where they don't know what's happening next. Constantly be in touch about what the process is looking like and show up over and over and over again. I think, again, one of the lessons I shared last year was I always want to underline my commitment to somebody. And if you show that you're committed through fast replies, through reassuring the replies, through remembering what they told you and remembering what you promised to do off the back of that, that will really stand you in good stead. And I cannot stress enough, the guys that I've interviewed over the years that are like real operators on the podcast, I'm like, whoa, no wonder this guy's going like places. They're the people that are really urgent when it comes to the stuff that they need to get on. So it's a fast reply on WhatsApp, it's a fast reply on email, it's a fast scheduling of the date we're going to speak, or a fast sharing of their headshot that we can use for the thumbnail. They just do stuff quickly. They're not somebody that lollygaggles and fannies around. Number 11, linked to urgency as well, is decision makers are time poor. Act accordingly. I don't know about you, but my email inbox is so busy, both for my sales director role, for my personal email, for my call Cranborough email. Consider the seniority of the decision makers you're reaching out to and imagine that their inbox is every bit as bad, if not worse. And when you have that level of knowledge and awareness, that should dictate how you show up with your communications to that individual. One of the first lessons that I learned when I started working for Ensley post-university at 21 was from my first boss, Alec, who had served in Afghanistan in the army. And he would say BLUF, which stands for bottom line up front. So at the start of an email, the start of a message, start of a phone call, to somebody senior, to somebody that really needs to crack on with their day, cut to the chase and begin with the end in mind. Spoiler alert, for those of you that have a podcast, when you write to a guest, the first line should be that, hi, whatever their name is, I would like to invite you to be a guest on my podcast, and then the podcast name. After that, it's when you can get into the other stuff like, I really love your work on brain health. I really love your work on mindset. I really love your work on peak performance, whatever it is you're going to get into. But begin with the end in mind and cut to the chase. If I'm emailing somebody in the student accommodation space, I'll open with something like, hi, whatever their name is. It'd be great to understand your plans for furniture for your summer turnaround. As soon as they read that email, they can decide straight away, is this something of interest? Now, that is both a pattern interrupt because you cut to the chase, but then you can go further than that and have a pattern interrupt where you open with something really quirky. It just depends on your sector. But for me, I begin with the end in mind. I'm bottom line up front. I cut to the chase and I give the person a chance to assess whether they want to read more. Now, the fortune will be in the follow-up, and when I follow up, I'll be able to get into more detail. But in the initial messages, you must be respectful of their time. They are time poor. Act accordingly. One of the other phrases that I learned in work in those early days was BBG. And that's not some sort of rude acronym. It is instead, be brief, be bright, be gone. So be brief was exactly what I was there in terms of the bottom line up front. Be bright is encouraging you to be positive, come with intent, show exactly where you want to go towards, because I believe the best salespeople and the most confident I feel when I'm in a sales environment is when I'm leading the conversation towards a solution for the prospect based on what they've told me. I show positive intent. I drive the conversation forward. I'm extremely encouraging of where we're at, and I get things going in the right direction. The be gone piece is exactly as it says. Out there here, out the way, move on, achieve what you need to achieve, be brief, be bright, and then toddle off. Get out of the way, move on to the next thing, allow them to move on to the next thing as well. The lesson here is be as direct as you can with what you want for them, what's required for them to move forward your conversation, and then crack on with the next thing. the number of decision makers that really enjoy dealing with me on a professional level, but they aren't necessarily friends of mine, is really high, because I would rather be trusted than be liked. Many decision makers are not looking for a new friend or a new pal to talk about golf or rugby or the tennis, which we're in London just now and Wimbledon's on. They are looking for a service provider they can trust, and over time the relationship may come from the back of that. But for me, I'm telling you, decision makers are time poor. Act accordingly. Lesson number 12. You're not just selling, you're orchestrating. I've used the word orchestrating because I want it to paint a really visual picture. To do the really big revenue I've done back-to-back years now, you're not just selling and transacting, you're actually orchestrating the entire buyer journey. The pre-sale content and the outreach, the meeting structure, the follow-ups, the proposal design, the handling internal objections, the handling external objections, the managing fulfillment, and the actual creation of the thing that you've said you were going to do. You are the conductor, making sure that every single part of that process hits the right note. Even if you're not delivering every single line and note yourself, you ensure that your colleagues and your team members deliver it to the standard that you promised and that you guaranteed when you met that person for the first time. Many sales guys make the mistake of washing their hands once the deal is signed and sealed, or a deposit's paid, or a purchase order is received. I don't do that anymore. You might say that's because I like to have a control of things, but I really do like to be involved to ensure that things happen as I planned and as I promised. The downside, and Lauren Johnson, the American psychologist who's been on the show a couple of years ago now, she explained that there's a light and a shadow side to every personality trait. One of the light sides to my desire for high agency and control and accountability is that it leads to great results for the people that work with me and deal with me. But one of the shadow sides to it is it means that it can burden me from a time perspective, and it takes away time that I can spend on prospecting new. However, it means that I have very sticky customers. In that first year when I joined in 2021, and I had no customers to start with, and I maybe had about 13 or 14 by the end of the first summer, all of them, bar maybe 2 who don't operate in student accommodation anymore, and that's the sole reason we don't work with them anymore, are all still paying customers from me right now. Because when I brought them in, I promised them what I was going to promise them. I made sure I delivered on it. They liked dealing with me. I was brief, I was bright, I was gone for those decision makers that require that. And it means that I don't start every year on 0. So of the guys that did 1.1 last year, there's probably 3 or 4 that had no projects this year. So I had to replace that to do 1.7. But there was loads in there that are just recurring customers. So there's a university in the Northwest that spends about 90k on mattresses. They started doing that in 2021. They did it again 2022, did it again 2023, did it again 2024. And that's because I was involved in the process the full way through. I stay on the account. I stay as a point of contact. Having great retention and clients knowing what it feels like to work with you personally, not just your company, is such a valuable skill. Again, I'm sure there's people that are sat there thinking there's nothing, they couldn't imagine anything worse than being in the fulfillment side of things for the deals they work on. But even having an internal check-in with the different stakeholders who are delivering what it is that you're meant to deliver, whether it's operations, whether it's stock, whether it's customer service, again, the terminology will differ across the businesses that you work within. Stay really close to what's happening so that you make sure the customer has a good experience, so that when they spend again, it's automatically going to be you. When you ask for a testimonial, you're going to get it. When you ask them, is there anyone else in your sector that you think would benefit from our product or service? They're going to be like, yeah, no problem at all. I'll happily recommend you to somebody I know, because that's another great way to grow your business. Cheesy phrase that I learned a long time ago now. Aftercare sells your next deal. Customer service sells your next deal. If you do a great job on that initially, they're going to come back over and over and over again. So when I think now about sales director and sales guy and business development, I also think about being an operator and an orchestrator so that things unfold as planned. You should know from end to end exactly every step of the way that the customer goes through, everything they experience, who they speak to, what emails they're going to get, what fulfillment is going to happen for them, when it's going to happen, and even allow you to check in, give them a call. How did that all go for you? Were you pleased with that? These things stand out massively. Again, it's not the norm to do it. By not being normal, you stand out off the back of that. So that has been my 12 big lessons from doing 1.7 million of sales in the last financial year. It's been an overdue episode. I definitely have a solo Q&A coming for you very, very soon. And I just want to say before we wrap up, I share these lessons not to posture or brag about the revenue that's involved. And I could be sharing lessons on 400 grand of sales for all it matters, because what we've been able to do in my day job has really been about repeatable behaviors, mindset, processes, and it's let me really excel in something that I knew I had the capability to do. And I know from all the guys that I've been in my sales coaching with since September last year, I'm arming them with something that they can just input and put their energy and their focus and their own personality and slant on. And the results have been amazing. Some of you may have seen the testimonial with Taylor McDonald, who's one of the guys that does property deal sourcing in the northeast of Scotland. He's done absolutely amazing. And for somebody within like 4 sessions with me to do like an 8 grand deal is really reassuring that everything that I'm teaching is not just to turn you into the Aldi or the BTEC version of Colin, but it's to turn you into the 2.0 version of yourself that allows you to just excel. And while I am pretty much at capacity for one-to-one coaching, although you may get lucky when you message me, I may have some capacity. I'm also working really hard on pulling together my sales masterclass, which will be a video course that delves into the end-to-end outbound, securing meetings, delivering that meeting, following up your proposal, closing, fulfillment, everything from that perspective. And that's going to be super, super detailed. So I will ask you if you're interested in that on LinkedIn or Instagram or in my email, colin@colcampbell.com, DM me the word sales and I will add you to the waitlist. But that has been a quick fire episode. Thank you so much for listening as always. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.